Thank you so much, Minister. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I would like to start by asking you about this moment that the world is living right now, on the eve of a tech revolution, artificial intelligence driving this revolution and offering at the same time big opportunities and big challenges, including economic and climate ones. Taking into account that this is a technology spearheaded by China and the United States, how can Brazil be part of this revolution? Well, I believe that in 3 years, Brazil did a lot in order to create a favorable business environment, and the investors see that. If you get an infrastructure investment in Brazil and the work that is being done and all the Brazilian infrastructure, well, numbers do not lie. We've never had so many B3 bids for roadways and infrastructure in general as we've had in recent years. The Ministry of Transports will fivefold our average of previous years in terms of business offerings in Brazil. All of that with a very significant rate of participation. The bids are very competitive. If we check the tax reform and what it will mean to Brazil, even the most pessimist forecast estimates a 12% impact on our GDP. The optimists, 20% tax exemption on investments. A cashback mechanism that transforms the tax on consumption in a progressive taxation because you're able to give back a certain percentage of the taxes to the low-income population. We are about to vote a new stage on the income reform in Brazil. We've had several stages. We are changing the rules because we want to change the inequality in Brazil. We have the best Gini index of recent history. With inequality, there is no development. So we are changing credit, insurance. We have the AI framework, read data. I can spend the whole day telling you about everything that we have approved and established to create a favorable business environment. Okay, now thinking long term and this new tech landscape around the world. I know that you, sir, have defended this agenda to bring more data centers into the country. What does Brazil have to offer? What's our standpoints? Well, Brazil is in a much better situation than our internal analysts claim. And the indexes, they show that finance, economy, it's about the indicators, right? And we are not paying attention to the indicators. We will have the lowest inflation in the frame of 4 years of the whole Brazilian history. An all-time low unemployment. An all-time high level of employment since 2010. And if you ask me about it, we are going to have the best fiscal results in 4 years since 2015, when the fiscal crisis started in Brazil. I have been reading the newspapers and the critics. I don't know if they are paid to say that. I don't know why they say such things, but we are going to deliver the best fiscal result in 4 years, even taking into account all of the default from previous years. And people talk about a fiscal crisis. So this is a collective delirium. I'm trying to understand it from the psychological point of view, because from the economic point of view, there's no way to understand it. People are saying that I'm going to change the primary results goals since 2023, and I have not done that once. They are saying that I'm not going to fulfill the goals, and I do that consistently. Every year, I believe that Brazil is in a best position than any other Latin country. With whom would you switch places? Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Argentina? We have tailwinds in Brazil. And why finance is no longer in our opposition's agenda? They don't talk about it anymore. It's not on the headlines. We have the investors talking about it. I'm concerned about the amount of money that we have inflowing. Minister, many investors are concerned about an eventual second term of President Lula, and that in this second office, then the fiscal framework will not be sustainable, expenses would be greater. And is he concerned about a more robust investment legacy? Well, the investors are not worried about that. They're worried about his fourth term. Lula is about to have his fourth term as the president of Brazil. And in every one, he has delivered a best result than the previous one in all aspects, and it will be no different. President Lula is social aware. He suffers when he realizes what is yet to be done in Brazil. He cannot accept our housing deficit. When he sees people starving, his despair, if deforestation rates do not improve, he argues with everybody. He wreaks havoc. So we need to manage the president's anguish and his revolt, which is very, very appropriate, and to guide us through the right path. More than 5% of our GDP is tax exemption to favor a handful of companies with this fiscal waiver. And every year I tell the Congress, we need to cut these benefits. We need to put a cap on expenditures. We have a lot of dire needs. What has happened? We had the 013 being approved, but then it was excluded from the agenda. But now it's being approved as a bill. So we are not going to give up. Everything that we've been trying to do since 2015. I remember at the beginning of the year, this analyst was saying that the dollar would reach 7 reais, 7.30, and it's now 5.40. And it's only 5 months since the previous catastrophic forecast and projections on the fiscal matters and the dollar exchange rate. People said that we could only put reins on inflation by 2027.
And we have interest rate at 15%. And they have to go down. However much pressure you may have on the central bank, the interest rates have to go down. You can't have 10% real interest rate. With inflation rate at 4%, how can you have inflation at 15%? What would justify it? Well, I don't manage the central bank. If I were, I would be voting for the decrease of the interest rate. 10% real interest rate does not make any sense. I'm allergic to inflation. I know what inflation will lead to. I know what it causes in people's lives. But you have to think about what makes sense. You know, the difference between a medicine and poison is just the dose. We can start 2026 in a comfortable position. We can get to the end of this term with all of the metrics and indicators at a much better level. We can control the debt paying low or less interest. That has an impact on inflation as well, because you will impact the company's manufacturing capacity. What do we need to do for the inflation expectations to be back to lower levels? They are going back to lower levels. They're not going back to lower levels because people are stubborn, because expectations are very much about what people want to happen as well. I see a lot of people sort of rooting against the country in the financial market. That person has their own ideology, so they're betting on the increase of the dollar. We have really to study this. We have to really understand what is going on, understand what we have lost, and, well, you asked about, I'm asked about this every time, and I always answer the same thing. We are determined to do what wasn't done till now. We want to respect the primary levels and keep or abide by the goals or targets that have been set, and we will pursue the results whatever happens. My team is really determined to find the results, to get to these results. Everything you've seen, we continue to deliver. One thing that would be wrong for me to say is to say that everything is solved. I have been giving interviews for 3 years, and I'm not going to say that. I will never say that, because it's very hard for one day for the Minister of Finance to say that every problem has been addressed and solved. And I know the Brazilian household. I've known it since 2003. My first position was in the Ministry of Planning in 2003, after the PITA term in Sao Paulo. I thought I would never see something as poor as that until I got to 2023 in the Ministry of Finance. I thought I wouldn't have to deal with such a complicated situation. But the same way I got to see the term after PITA's term, Sao Paulo was very much in debt when I took office, and they got substantial levels of investment. And I know what I did to get that. And I know what the problems are. I know what the mandatory expenses are. You don't need to be an economist to know what the problems are, but you need to create the political environment for it. You need to relieve tension in the Congress. The Congress has to understand, as they have been understanding. Well, it's 513 Congress people. It's easier to convince 10 people than 513 people, because they have so much to think about. But we're taking large steps forward. We're striding forward. Next week, the Supreme Court is going to rule about a matter concerning the financial responsibility going on to the legislative branch. The Congress won't be able to create expenses without creating new sources of revenue. That is going to be a revolution. I am sure that this value has been understood. With all the challenges that you have seen, I mean, people want to deliver fast, and I understand that people expect speed, but you need to work at the speed that the economy will allow you to. Otherwise, it's just going to backfire. And we're continue to manage relationships and whatever we need to manage and we're on the right path. No law is going to be revoked because these laws are on the right track. This is a Bloomberg Green event, right? So let's try and go back to the energy transition discussion. The world has changed ever since you took office as the Minister of Finance. Countries are spending more money on warfare. Bill Gates said the other day that the world is not going to end because of financial or end because of climate issues. How difficult is it to have the transition or the energy transition looking at the whole world scenario? The competitive edges that we have in Brazil go hand in hand with the climate agenda. Brazil has clean, cheap energy. It would make no sense for us to replace them with dirty, expensive energy. So what Bill Gates thinks doesn't really make sense. We need to perfect the regulatory framework for the electricity segment, and there's a lot of lobbying. The electricity segment has a whole lot of lobbying. There's the coal folks and you know the petroleum, the oil folks, but we're making a headway. Biofuels, for example. Brazil has 30 to 40 years tradition in biofuel. We've only gotten better. Why would we let go of this agenda because of the climate issue or the climate agenda? That's a bit of a controversial statement that the climate isn't a problem, right? I have an academic history. I'm a scholar. So I always look at what scientists are saying. But again, there's no reason for Brazil to let go of an agenda that can be so beneficial to the country. I've been speaking about Redata, BFSS, TFFF, and they have a connection to the green agenda, and that really excites investors that want to invest in Brazil. So I don't see any reason why Brazil would move away from the sustainability agenda. When it comes to the TFFF, do you expect other countries to make investments? From what I've heard from my counterparts, I think would be able to have about $10 billion by the end of next year. Brazil will start chairing COP next week. And there are several work fronts. There's the taxonomy coalition when it comes to the international carbon credit market, but what is most accessible with support of the World Bank is the Bank of the Forests. So Itamaraty, the Brazilian diplomacy, the Minister of Finance, we have to make that fund happen. If we do, we're going to start having practical results. We're not going to be preserving the forest because someone, would we stop preserving forests because someone thinks that the financial or the climate program is at an end? No, that wouldn't make any sense. It's very important to preserve the forests. And then you have a chance to secure sustainability for the country at a very low cost in comparison to the benefits that you're going to have. I think we've come to an end of our 20 minutes, Minister. Thank you very much for your time.